Good morning. My name is Menica, and I'm a worship associate here at Horizon. We are excited to welcome you to our worship service this morning. We're so glad to have you with us today, whether you're joining in person or virtually, whether you're here for the first time or whether you've been here for longer than you can remember. Here at Horizon, we welcome people of all faiths and of no faith in particular. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome among us. I want to call your attention to the art on the walls around you. The 25 pieces of art exhibited in our sanctuary are from 19 members of the Visual Arts Guild of Frisco. These works of art were selected by a jury from art submitted by 53 of their members. Their art theme is Good Vibes. They will be on our walls through the last Sunday in February, and there will be a reception to meet and greet the artists on a Sunday, probably in early February.
Good morning, folks. I have two other things that I would really like to share with you this morning. The first one is that immediately following our worship service today, we will be having a town hall, which we do each year in preparation for our congregational meeting. And so if you want to be a part of that, please gather over in the choir area. And if you do not want to be a part of that and you want to keep visiting with your friends, please hang out outside the sanctuary so that folks can hear each other talking during the town hall. I have another thing I'd like to share with you all. I'm inviting forward Kel Sabo, who is our new music director here at Horizon. We're so excited and lucky to have Kel, and if you'd like to join our choir, if you've ever thought that you might like to sing, or you might like to join in making music together, no prior experience required, please join us at 7:30 on Thursday nights. Thank you so much. Our call to worship this morning comes from the writings of the Reverend Alicia Ford. Alicia works at the UUA and identifies as someone of African descent, a queer cisgender female with deep roots in Tobago. This is when we pause to remember. When we pause to remember who we are, companions on this grand experiment called life, when we take a moment to shed the ways we have been carefully taught, to lead from fear, to punish the poor, to persecute those who don't look like we do, to deny rights to those who love, to believe that we are separate, that some people are superior to others. When we take a moment to shed all of that and hear our stories, hear and see each other into existence, into community, when we take a moment to embrace, to practice a different way of being, when we answer the call of love, then we are living into the promise of building the world that we dream about. It is beautiful to dream, to cast a vision, to stretch our minds into the future and imagine what may be if we were to build a new way of being, not someday, but beginning again today, beginning again every day that we have breath, taking courage with these hands and hearts to make real the dream of a more equitable world, to journey together, seeking to be transformed even as we transform, becoming explorers and learners in this world around us, humbled by what we do not yet know, fulfilling the promise of healing a fragmented world, laboring not just in hope, but also in love. It is in this spirit that we commit. In this spirit we pray. In this spirit we gather. Come, let us worship together.
Our chalice lighting words this morning come from Reverend Rebecca Savage. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people, united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that uphold whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move with integrity toward our highest ideals. Please stand in body or in spirit for our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together. Please remain standing for our opening hymn, number 318, We Would Be One.
Before we do our Time for All Ages, I wanted to say if you brought donations for MetroCrest services, I'm going to ask you to pass them down the row so that the young or the young at heart can bring them and place them in this basket up here. So at this time, I would like to invite all our young folks up for a story. Well, good morning, everybody. It's so good to see all of you here. And you know, this is a really special weekend. Monday is a very special holiday. Can somebody raise their hand and tell me what it is? What's the special holiday? Yes, we're going to be honoring Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that will be happening all over the United States this weekend. In fact, Horizon marched in a parade yesterday, and you can see pictures from people participating in social media. Well, I have to tell you, I kind of have a connection to this. I had the chance to visit Birmingham, Alabama in October, a city where Black people worked and demonstrated for their civil rights, led by Dr. King. So you should be able to see a church behind me. But did you know that children played a really big role in overturning legal segregation? I was reminded of their brave actions when I went to Birmingham this past October, and it happened 60 years ago. So here is their story. What are we going to do, asked Martin Luther King Jr., the well-known American civil rights leader, as he sat with his friends at a meeting in the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. King, who was trying to lead the black people of Birmingham, in their struggle to end segregation, was worried that he and his friends were going to fail in their mission. Nevertheless, he rose from his chair at the front of the group. Who will demonstrate with me tomorrow in a brave attempt to end segregation? Who will risk going to jail for the cause? Often 400 people would show up for the meetings like this one, like shown behind me, but 35 or so would volunteer to protest. Those who did would gather downtown and parade through the streets, carrying signs, chanting and singing, sending the message that segregation has to end. Segregation means separating black people from white people in all aspects of life. It was law back then, and of course it was not fair. In the 1950s and 1960s, many thousands of people, black and white, worked to end segregation. But in many places like Birmingham, segregation was the law, like on the books. And if black people tried to go somewhere they weren't allowed to by the law, they could get arrested and they could even be hurt. So in the spring of 1963, that's 60 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. went to Birmingham, Alabama, one of the largest and most heavily segregated cities in America, to bring people together to change the law. You see, the people who protested were very scared. Many protesters were put in jail, or they could even be hurt if they were caught joining in on a protest or even planning a protest. Dr. King, seeing that no one answered the call again, tried to inspire the group. "The struggle will be long," he said. "We must stand up for our rights as human beings. Who will demonstrate with me, and if necessary, be ready to go to jail for it?" There was a pause, and then the whole crowd gasped. Guess who stood up? Children. All the people who stood up were children. Martin Luther King thanked the children and told them he appreciated the offer, but that he could not ask them to go to jail. They still wouldn't sit down. They wanted to help. That night, Dr. King talked with a close group of friends about the events of the day. "What are we going to do?" he asked. "The only volunteers we got were children and teens. We can't have a protest with children." Everyone nodded except his friend, Jim Bevel. "Wait a minute," said Jim. "If they want to do it, I say let the children do it." "But they're too young," the other member said. "They are not too young to want their freedom," replied Jim Bevel. That night, they decided that any child old enough to go to the church and to be a member was old enough to march. The children heard about the decision and told their friends, and when the time came for the march, 1,000 children, teenagers, and college students gathered. They were arrested and put in jail. And the next day, you know what happened? Even more children, teens, and college students showed up. Some of their parents and relatives, too. Soon, lots of adults joined in, and finally, 1,000 children were locked up in a children's jail. And there was no more room for anyone else. All over the world, people noticed, and they started to say bad things about the leaders in Birmingham. Even worse, by the leaders, I mean the governmental leaders, not Martin Luther King. Even worse, everyone in Birmingham was afraid to leave their house. And so businesses were hurt because nobody went shopping, nobody rode the buses, and things like that. So they decided that they had to change things. A short time later, black people and white people of Birmingham sat down together and made a pact to desegregate, meaning not having laws anymore that kept black and white people separate. They had made a pact to desegregate the city and let everyone go to the same places. So today, when we tell this story, and sometimes it's known as the Children's Crusade or the Children's March of 1963, many talk about Martin Luther King Jr. But we should also remember the brave children and teens whose courage helped to change the mindset of white people in legal segregation in Birmingham and in the rest of the United States. So we are now going to go do some great things. Thank you for listening. Let's go ahead and sing you to our classes.
Justice, as you
Here at Horizon, we share our gifts with one another in the hopes that they will sustain this community for many years to come. The offering will now be joyfully given and received.
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Whoa, so is life.
Our first reading this morning comes from Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. This is an excerpt. He wrote, "Beyond this, I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. Just as the 8th century prophets left their little villages and carried their 'Thus saith the Lord' far beyond the boundaries of their hometowns, and just as the Apostle Paul left his little village of Tarsus and carried the gospel of Jesus Christ to practically every hamlet and city of the Greco-Roman world, I too am compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my particular hometown. Like Paul, I must constantly respond to the Macedonian call for aid. Moreover, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider." Here ends the reading. We come now to the time in our worship service that we set aside for meditation and prayer. We'll share silence, hear the joys and sorrows of this community, hear a spoken prayer, and then join together in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. So I invite you to join me now in a time of silence. We hold in our hearts this morning all the joys and sorrows in this room, not spoken aloud. Let us at this time put hands on hearts. Feel the heartbeat, the connection to life. Breathe in peace. And say to yourself silently, I will love myself. I will love others. And that love can heal the world. May all beings find connection. May all people find comfort. May all of us find ways to be more loving to one another. The words of our written prayer this morning come from the writings of the Reverend Terence Strauss. Spirit of life, love eternal, we rest in holy gratitude. We surrender to a mystery beyond ourselves, asking forgiveness for our mistakes, those times we have been selfish or thoughtless. Breathing in and out, we offer grace. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We honor our earth, supporting and sustaining life. We breathe in, opening our hearts to wonder for just one moment, feeling a deep connection with all beings. May it be so. Amen. I invite us now to remain seated and join in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life.
Our second reading was recently found in the home of a member of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Atlanta and was donated back to the congregation, thus uncovering a little sliver of history long forgotten. You'll hear an explanation in a bit more detail during the sermon. A thank you letter written by Coretta Scott King to Reverend Eugene Pickett, Senior Minister of the UU Congregation of Atlanta, October 31st, 1968. Dear Reverend Eugene Pickett, thank you for your letter of October 24th informing me of contributions which you have received for the purpose of establishing a memorial to my husband. I am enclosing letters to the individuals you listed, and I would greatly appreciate it if you would forward it to them. Please convey to the members of your congregation my deepest appreciation for their help at the time of my husband's death. Their concern and sympathy were demonstrated in many ways and made a tragic and confused period less trying for my family and me. It would have been impossible to provide for the many visitors in my home without the generosity of the members of the Atlanta Unitarian Church. The food, transportation, and lodging which they provided will be remembered as a tangible demonstration of the brotherhood in action which the Unitarian Church has always stressed. Opening and sorting and handling the tremendous amount of mail sent to my children and me would truly have been an insurmountable task without the help of the people who responded to the Unitarian Church's appeal. Through the years, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta has been a leader in bridging the gap between the white and black communities. My family and I will always remember how warmly and willingly you extended friendship and love during our most difficult hour. Please know that we will always be grateful. Sincerely yours, Coretta Scott King. Here ends the reading.
So when I was beginning researching for this week, I came across a story about Dr. King as a child that I thought could bring some humanness and authenticity to the legacy we are working to honor this morning. So that is how we'll begin. The King family had a formal dinner at their house together every night. King's father was adamant that dinner shouldn't start until he got home, but of course he was a minister. And we know how ministers can often get caught up and things take longer than expected, or at least I know. So as dinner time approached, the King children would be peeking out the windows on a constant lookout for their father coming up the street. And once he finally did get home from church, family members and often house guests gathered around the table. And the custom was for the children to each recite a Bible verse before eating. And the boys, very anxious to eat, would always choose the shortest one in the Bible. Perhaps you know it, Jesus wept. So very much preacher's kid behavior. I'm always amazed when looking back at the age that Martin Luther King Jr. was accepted such high callings. He was ordained and became an associate pastor at just 19 years old. He was 26 when he offered the basement of his church in Montgomery to organizers working on the bus boycott, and soon found himself at the center of a movement for civil rights. He was chosen by his peers because of his calm and steady presence, his activist family, and the fact that he had less to lose than some of the other, maybe more established clergy. In short, he was able and he was willing. It's important for us to know and remember, too, that King's legacy has been whitewashed, has been made more palatable in the years since his death. The thing about those whose lives are cut short, taken from us, is that they never get a chance to change. They are frozen in time, just as they were, for us to interpret as we will. But Dr. King was beginning to change his ideas. He broke with the Democratic Party over the war in Vietnam and was beginning to expand his activism toward economic justice when he was assassinated. The day before he was assassinated, he gave a speech in support of striking sanitation workers, demanding better working conditions after 2 of them were killed on the job. He planned to march in support of the strike later that week. King had recently launched the Poor People's Campaign, along with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an effort that worked to bring together working people of all races to show that their economic struggle was shared, to show that even across racial divides that might exist, they had more in common with each other than the people they worked for. And this was a threat to King's life, something it is clear that he knew and understood. Let us not forget, too, that there is documented evidence that our own government tried to bully and harass and scare Dr. King into taking his own life. This message of solidarity, of building relationship across differences to lead to liberation for all, this has always been terrifying to those who have something to gain from the system as it is. And there's a tendency, I think, for some folks to say, well, of course, the civil rights movement was good and right and necessary, but they can't use that same lens to look at marches in 2020 or marches today. They might say they're unnecessary or not done right. And this is a tool of the same oppressor to silence a movement that acknowledges the network of mutuality that we are all a part of. We know that people of color continue to face harassment and death at the hands of the police simply for existing. We know that folks don't always have access to the same job opportunities, housing opportunities, opportunities to simply live without assumptions being made as others do. Those of us who are white and raised in the dominant American culture are not often taught to look at our privilege or to unpack our biases. And each one of those things keeps us from realizing what King said long ago, which is basically that we cannot go on living this way any longer if we want to continue to survive. Our country has conveniently turned our backs on that message. During this time of year, when we are called to reflect on Dr. King's legacy, I find myself returning to a mystical experience he had late one night in his kitchen. Early in his time as an activist, in the midst of his work on the bus boycott, King returned home from a meeting late, and he found his wife asleep. He was standing in his kitchen when the phone rang, and a voice spoke to him saying, "Leave Montgomery immediately if you have no wish to die." King, hanging up the phone, jittery with fear and anxious energy, went on to put on a pot of coffee, and then kind of fell down into a chair in his kitchen table. In public, King was and is known for having a calm presence, non-anxious in the face of danger. But in private, he was a human being with human worries and hurts, just the way we all are. And much of his outward presence was because of his faith, something he held, for the most part, close to the chest. But he describes the moment in detail in A Stride Toward Freedom. He wrote, "I was ready to give up. With my coffee sitting untouched before me, I tried to think a way to move out of the picture without appearing a coward. In this state of exhaustion, when my courage had all but gone, I decided to take my problem to God. And with my head in my hands, I bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud. And the words I spoke to God that midnight are still vivid in my memory. I am here, taking a stand for what I believe is right. But now I am afraid. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left to give. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone." And at that moment, he writes, "I experienced the presence of the divine as I had never experienced it before. It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, "Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth. And God will be at your side forever." And he said, almost at once, my fears began to go. My uncertainty disappeared, and I was ready to face anything. This is the kind of faith that most people dream about having, where we feel so certain, so sure of what we're doing that all these questions about whether we're doing the right thing just kind of fall away. We feel guided by something we cannot see or understand. There is an inner knowing. And I think if we are lucky, we will experience this from time to time throughout our life, maybe only in small glimmers. But this story of the reluctant leader, of feeling so scared and uncertain that he wanted to quit, and yet still being called, is kind of classic prophetic leadership. Some of us may know the story of Isaiah from the Hebrew Scriptures, the prophet who answers God's call. Dr. King, in his letter from a Birmingham jail that we heard earlier, cites that example of the prophets as his reason for leaving his home and his church in Atlanta and organizing elsewhere. He says, "I'm cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities. I cannot sit by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham." We ourselves may often be reluctant prophets, called even if we don't want to be, even if we wonder, can't someone else do this? Even if we think, can't someone else do this better? I think all of us have been called in one way or another to various things in our lives. We might feel called to parent children and open ourselves to the uncertainty of that journey, knowing we don't know the way ahead. We might feel called to marriage, feeling ourselves drawn towards something we don't fully understand, drawn towards someone with whom we share a love that we're ready to build our life on. We might feel called to make a change in whatever part of our life, to go back and do something we feel tugging at us, even though we might have tried to ignore it. And our calls can look different than the voice King writes about. They might come in that gentle, tugging feeling in the pit of your stomach towards something often that scares you. It might come in an overwhelming sense of wonder at the world and our place in it. And it might come from inside your head, that question you cannot help but turn over and over in your mind. The tugging at the back of your brain, why am I still thinking about this? If you think, well, it would be really cool to serve in that leadership position, but I've never done it before and I have no idea what I'm doing, I can't do that. You have been called. I don't mean it to be funny. I really mean it. Because I really think that that's how we all feel before moving into the work we need to be doing. And I think that's how Dr. King felt, a young man talking out loud to God because he was ready to give up, to find a way out, to call it all off because he did not think he was the right person to lead. So if even some of the world's most prophetic leaders openly admit to feeling like they don't know what they're doing, are we not in good company? It wouldn't be a call if we weren't doing something scary, something fierce, something we feel unprepared for, unsure if we're the right person for the job. The Reverend Teresa Soto, UU poet, reminds us about dreams in their poem, "We Hold On." There is a moment when the dream we share is newly born, wet and wriggling in our hands. Sometimes it's true that salvific futures look vulnerable and small before us. We remain unsure. Just hold on. Anything good was small at first. You know that Dr. King said, "I have a dream." It was definitely not the "I have a reality" speech. It was real in a different way that could be felt, that could be shared, and they held on. So I believe in dreams. That's not to say that everything we dream is real or comes true, but I believe that dreams are a way that some message is trying to get through to us, whether from our own subconscious mind or from some other place, from somewhere we cannot tune into during the rush of the day. To believe in dreams and to make them real are two different things. To believe is to listen on a deep level to where that small voice might be calling you that you have not yet been able to hear. And to make them real, we need to think about what we've already done and what have we already made happen. And where has that not been enough? Where is there more to do? We need to ask ourselves, what does it mean to exist both for the outside community and for the church inside these walls? In the words of the Reverend Terence Strauss, Unitarian Universalism at its best can transform the world. That's not lip service, and it's not a pie in the sky. I mean, if we can be healthy enough to do our inner spiritual work within, if we honor our deepest commitments and stay accountable to each other and our covenant to upholding the worth and dignity of those who are particularly caught in the crossfire of oppressions among ourselves, then we can truly go beyond. The thing is, when things are uncertain, we really have to return, like King returned, to that small voice. And it sometimes speaks to us the most in our relationships. In the second reading we heard a bit earlier, we heard a letter written by Coretta Scott King to the Reverend Eugene Pickett, who was minister of the UU Congregation of Atlanta and went on to become president of the UUA. And this letter and another from King himself were found in the basement of a congregant there this summer and were returned to the congregation this fall. And they've been shared with us colleagues so that we can share them with you. And the common thread that I hear across this letter is the emphasis on relationship. I'm thinking of the relationships that Dr. King and Reverend Pickett had with each other, and the way that support really comes in those most difficult moments. Many of us who have experienced the death of someone close to us know that there is so much work to be done at a time when you feel like you can't do anything. And to have people go through letters and cards and take care of rides and house people who came to grieve and organize food and organize travel, that must have been a gift to the King family at a time when the shock of his assassination had not yet worn off. This was one church to another, helping a family through crisis, one that was felt too by the whole world. That kind of intimate care is something you can really only do for someone you are already having a relationship with. Sometimes it's not the prophetic ministry that makes the most difference, but it's the unseen work of pastoral care, of loving one another well, that can carry the most power. So I think the question today is not whether we understand all of this about call and racial justice and relationships, but how do we move forward? What to set our sights on next? Sometimes the injustice of the world can feel so big and we can feel so small. It can be hard to know where to go from here. There is so much change and uncertainty, and not a lot of feeling like we have a clear path forward, like we know what is next. But I would like to challenge us to remember that for King himself, for many in the movement, for many justice advocates today, it is never clear what is next. The unknown is right beside us, our constant traveling companion on this journey. The goal or expectation cannot be to have a clear plan and to follow that plan and never deviate from that plan, because that is how we fail. That is how we sleep through the revolution. That is how we mess this up. That is not how we do this work for the long haul. Instead, we let our values and our mission guide us, and we invest time, money, and heart in relationships. This congregation has spent years now in partnership with an interfaith organization called Faith in Texas, an organization where people with common values work toward social, racial, and economic justice. We have formed, too, a partnership with Carrollton Pride so that this local Carrollton community can be reminded that this church loves and celebrates queer and trans folks, and that others need to do the same. Our Green Sanctuary folks have worked hard to get their certification completed, and in that way, we are in relationship with other congregations working on this and with the wider world. We are in relationship with those we share our plate with, knowing that we try to choose local or UU organizations and to really understand why those partnerships make sense for us. And there is a lot of uncertainty about what else this congregation's justice work might entail, especially in a place that is almost crying out for healing, for love, in a time when we so badly need one another. And the truth is that no one can come and tell you what to do. That's not the job of any minister. But we, you and I, and more so whoever comes next, can work on determining that vision together. Keyword being together. We know that the injustices of our world are all interconnected. Poverty, the way we treat workers in this country, mass incarceration, racial justice, police brutality, and so many others. They are all connected to each other. And so we have to be too, if we have any hope of making change. So as we begin to close our time together this morning, I'm thinking about relationships, about calling, about that small voice that I think speaks to each one of us in different ways. And I return to what it might mean really to believe in dreams, both King's dream for America and our dreams today to build upon the legacy he left behind. And I think that to believe in dreams is not to make judgments about what may or may not be possible, but it is instead to realize that someone or something is trying to tell us something, to nudge us towards something, to send us out to do something on behalf of those who maybe cannot do for themselves. And we don't know what might be possible, but we will give our whole hearts to trying because we believe. May it be so. Amen. I invite us to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our closing hymn, Love Will Guide Us.
Love
We extinguish this flame, but not our commitment to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. This we do because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world.
I invite you now to join hands if you're comfortable, or stand close to one another if you're not. So friends, my hope for you as you go forth today is to allow yourself to believe in dreams. Go in peace.